So his name is Sebastian Witalec. And in reality, he's a hidden hero. You think, I don't need that. My voice carries by itself. Like I'm like a god now, so I don't need this. Let's keep going. All right, so I'm gonna disconnect to my screen. Yeah, that should go. And underneath, what am I? I'm a NativeScript superhero. This is how we rock. You wanted rock and roll? You've got rock and roll. T-shirts, I feel free. All right, let me get connected. Where am I? Here we are. I can't see myself just yet. How about now? Okay. Gather windows. Arrangement. Mirror display. I still need my jacket. My clicker is there. Come on. Anyone, help me. Here we go. Up. One clicker, wrong clicker. There we are. Cool. Oh, that's not what I wanted. And here we are. All right. So I want to talk to you about code sharing. So like, how do you basically do the web and mobile using Angular and NativeScript? So like I introduced myself already, I'm Sebastian Witalec. I'm a senior developer advocate at Progress, and you can follow me on Twitter. I'm Seba Wita, which is easy to follow. So first up, for those of you who don't know what's NativeScript, it's basically an open source framework that allows you to build mobile applications. Like you can reuse your existing skills. So if you know JavaScript, TypeScript, Vue, Angular, you name it, basically you reuse the web skills that you already have. But the cool thing is that the iOS and Android applications that you get out of it, they are 100% native, right? Like, I mean, we still run JavaScript underneath, but the UI is native and you have 100% native user experience, which is pretty cool. So that's basically the foundation of what you need to know. And the goal for this talk pretty much is how can we have one project that can cover Android, iOS, and web, right? This is pretty much our goal and idea. And this didn't explain you enough yet. Basically, we're looking for one project to, well, docs, kind of thing. All right, so how do we do that? Like the secret sauce for me is basically combining what NativeScript can do, which gives you iOS and Android, and then Angular, which basically gives you the web, but also an architecture that enables you to actually do the code sharing, right? This is pretty much the idea. So let's have a look at some core concepts. If we, for example, had like a player component, which had like a name and a Twitter handle and maybe like a say hello to method that you can pass a name and just says hi something. Then in Angular, basically, you could just create a div and then do some like couple of handlebars and then display the name, display the Twitter. And then you also could have a button where on click event, you could call say hello to web, right? The cool thing is that I can reuse the same component underneath, and I could actually use NativeScript syntax, and I can still do the binding. So I can bind to the name property to a Twitter, and then instead of click, I can just bind to on tap event, and I still can call say hello to, but in this case, I can pass mobile, right? So you're already getting the idea, right? Like I can basically, most of that code is pretty much similar. So how about we put everything together, right? Another really important thing that Angular gives me is dependency injection, which really helps me in some scenarios. So imagine if you want to make an HTTP call, the way it's done in a web browser is completely different to how it's done on iOS and Android, right? Like, you can't just make an AJAX call on Android. So those interfaces are actually quite different. So how we can solve it really is, in web, this is what you would normally do. In your ng module, we import an HTTP client module, which provides you with HTTP client, okay? But then in NativeScript, basically, since it's slightly different, we have a NativeScript HTTP client module, which you can also import, and it also provides you with HTTP client, right? So it provides you with something that has exactly the same interface, which basically means that later on when I'm creating my own service, I can just import HTTP client, use dependency injection to get the one I need, and then let's say I call like HTTP get to get data. And the cool thing is that if I build this project for web, then it's going to use the HTTP client from web. If I build it for mobile, I'm going to get iOS or Android version of it because the dependency injection is going to take care of it. So basically, we start getting all the building blocks that we need for code sharing. OK, so let's have a look at the idea of the project structure. So one of the approaches which I kind of talk a lot about is like the monorepo approach. So you have one project where you have all your like navigation, your services, your directives. You can even like have some shared variables, but then you have two different style sheets, one for web, one for mobile. Then components. For most of the components, you would share the TypeScript class of the component itself, but then you would have different HTML syntaxes for web and for mobile. And it is for a right reason as well, because sometimes what you want to display on a 20-inch screen is different to what you display on a small phone screen, right? So they should be different, right? And also when it comes to modules, like if you group things together and you, for example, want to use lazy loaded modules, you can actually share all those components. You can share the navigation of that module, but then what goes into the imports and declarations into each individual ng module is different for web and mobile. So for example, if you want to use Angular material, that's not going to run on NativeScript because those are not native Android or iOS components, but you can make it happen. So once we have all this project together, then we need some sort of build system that allows me to take, for example, the shared files and the web specific and then build you a web Angular project, or vice versa, ignore the web specific ones and use the shared and the NativeScript files and build you a mobile app. Okay? Next thing that we need also is some sort of code splitting methodology that allows you to actually say, okay, this is a web file, this is a mobile file. So by default, this is how your component would look like, right? You would have a component.ts and component.html. But what I can do is actually add additional file, which will be component.tns.html. And this automatically becomes a NativeScript file, or NativeScript version of the HTML file. And the one without .tns, it remains as the web-specific one. I want to add CSS or Sass. I can do the same thing. Basically, wherever I add .tns, that automatically starts doing the splitting. So if I wanted to have one CSS that is shared, I would just have one CSS file. And that's pretty much like the idea. So this is kind of like the concept of what was my dream like a year and a half ago when I started working on this project. So how do you start working on that? So we created what we call schematics. So it is available under add NativeScript/schematics npm package. So if you install that, then using Angular CLI, you could create a code sharing project. All you have to do is call ng-new --collection NativeScript schematics, provide the project name, and then say just --shared. And then this will scaffold you a new project that already is ready to build both web and mobile projects, which is pretty cool. So how does it work, or like how does the build work? So in reality, if you want to build for the web, you can just call ngserve, and it's like business as usual. In this case, like Angular CLI will just ignore all the .tns files, and then you just use the shared and web-specific ones, and then as a result, it will provide you with a web application. Okay? For mobile, we're using a Webpack build for that. So what you can do is you can call tns run ios ---- bundle. So tns is the NativeScript CLI, or you could actually, if you don't want to use this specific command, you can just say npm run ios or npm run android. And then this will kind of work in two steps. So in the first step, Webpack steps in and then looks at all the files, and wherever it sees .tns files, it creates like a virtual file system and then renames all the .tns files to as if they were without the name, right? So if you had that component.tns.ts, this will become component.ts, okay? Like in a virtual file system. And that, by doing that, we're actually recreating the structure of NativeScript project. And then as a second step, we just basically follow into NativeScript build, and then we build you a mobile application, be it an Android app or iOS app. And in case you didn't get it, like I'm going to illustrate it with a quick video. So if the tiger is NativeScript build, and the duck is like basically the web files that we don't want, then we basically get Webpack that deals with that. So if you watch that, this is how it works. There you go. The tiger didn't get the duck, no web files, and it just works, right? This is amazing. Snoop Dogg, yes. So I want to do a quick demo to show you like a project that I was working on. So what I did, everybody knows Angular's Tour of Hero, right? The tutorial. Like, who went through the tutorial? Hands up. one, two, well, yeah, quite a few of you. Okay, so you all know the tutorial. So basically, I have this project, and then from inside this project, what I can do, I can call just ngserve-o to build the application. And then additionally, from the same project, I can run tns run ios dash bundle, and then this will build the application. So this is my web app. This will build my mobile. I already built it, like it takes like a minute, so I'm not going to do it on stage. I'll just show you an existing app. And I want to show you a few bits of it. So the app module, for example, we would use like HTTP client module, like I mentioned before. This also uses like HTTP client in-memory web API module. So that's like, instead of calling, like if you don't trust Wi-Fi at conferences, you should use like a local APIs, like just mock it. And then like there's a bunch of other ones. And then for NativeScript version of the HTTP module, like I'm declaring the same component, etc. But in this case, I'm importing the NativeScript's HTTP client module. Okay. But I can also pretty easily use the HTTP client in-memory web API module, because it basically, this is a platform agnostic module, so I can use it across different projects, which is quite cool. And then I have my hero service, and this is the fun part. So when I was migrating this project, I literally didn't touch this service. Like I was like, the service already works. It allows me to go and fetch a bunch of heroes. Give me a 404, I can get a specific hero, or I can make a search, or I can even like add a new hero, right? And there's like a whole bunch of like you can delete, etc., etc. So I didn't have to touch that. I was basically like saying, this works, it should work in my mobile app as well. So then I have my dashboard, and the dashboard uses dependency injection to import the hero service. And then in here on ng-on-init, I can get the heroes, which basically calls an observable and then returns like a bunch of them. And then basically, this is the HTML on how you display each of those heroes. So I have this top heroes tag, and then there's an ng4 that displays like my top 5 heroes on the dashboard. And then I do the same thing for NativeScript. So it's just basically different XML that I use here. So in this case, I'm like use like a grid layout, but I'm using like a flexbox here, and then for each item, so I'm also using ng4. And I'm going also through the heroes, and then for each of them, I'm just displaying a little label so that you can display each hero. And then I can also provide like a router link. So when you click on it, it navigates to the details page for that specific hero. One other cool thing I want to show you, you see I'm using this app hero search in here, in both of them. So it's app hero search. So it's actually exactly the same tag between the two. And that's because I have this hero search component, which I created in a code sharing way. So like out of the box, this hero search will have 2 versions of the HTML and then reuse the same code underneath. So that's why I can actually start reusing the tags for the components that I create myself. So let's get to the demo, and I can show you how it works. So you probably already saw the hero, so I can go to the dashboard, and I can go to the dashboard over here. And like intentionally, I actually made those like look slightly different, but the functionality that we have underneath is pretty much the same. So I could, for example, in a search, search for NA, and then I have anything that has NA inside. I can, in here, use my app search component, just add NA, and then also displays those heroes. So if I click on Dynama here and here, I can navigate to both and then display some details about that. Interestingly, what I actually decided to do that to make it different, I wanted to, for example, my messages in the web app, I'm displaying always on every page. In case of mobile app, the space on the screen is sacred. So in this case, I created a different component where I just navigate to, and I can display the same messages. And in both cases, I can go nicely and clear up the messages. The cool thing is like all I'm interacting here with is like 100% native components. So like all these buttons and text fields, etc., they're 100% native. So it's the drawer, so you actually get a pretty nice user experience. So I can click, and you have like nice animations with things slide left and right with minimal effort. That's pretty much the idea. So this is basically how I took the tour of heroes to make them code sharing. And it literally took me 2 hours to build the NativeScript version of the same app. It was additional 5 hours to do the styling, but the actual functionality took me a couple of hours, so it's pretty cool. I'm terrible at styling, so don't judge me. This is the best I could get it to be. So yeah, pretty cool. If you want to check it out, you could go to my GitHub, so just /sebawita/Tour of Heroes. It's there, and there's actually 2 ways of building it. So you could even, we have this preview app, so you could literally have it running on your phone in 5 minutes. So do we have 5 minutes? No, I don't have enough time to show you that. Next thing I want to talk about is migration, because it's fair enough that you start a new project today and you want to build a code sharing project. But what about existing Angular projects? Like, how do you do that? Do you create a code sharing project and then copy things over? That just sounds very messy, right? So what I did with my colleague Stanimira, we built this schematic that allows you to migrate existing web Angular projects. So you have to be at least on Angular 6, and that's done with schematics. So imagine you have this scenario. You already created yourself a project and you build it, spent months on it. What you can do is call ngArt at NativeScript/schematics. So this will automatically install the NPM module for that schematic, and you convert your project to a code sharing structure, right? It's not going to do absolutely all the magic. You still have to add your HTML for the NativeScript files and populate some of the ng modules, but you will restructure the project. The project will be in a ready state. And then after that, your ng server will still work, but you will also be able to run TNS run iOS or Android with -- bundle for Webpack. And then this will build you like a very trivial version of the NativeScript app, but your project will be in a ready state to kind of continue the migration process. We also working and notice that there's a little star on the bottom right, top right corner, which is under development. So if you already have an existing NativeScript project, we also go in with the same idea by calling ngGenerate add web. So that should actually do the reverse, going from native mobile to shared. And then kind of like you can still follow the same story. Okay, so this is how you take your existing project and then convert it in the code sharing one. The next thing is migrating individual components. So what you usually would have to do is like go to each component that you want to share and add the .tns.html file or .tns.css file, which could be time consuming, right? So we created a schematic called migrate component. So if you call ngg migrate component, then after that you provide the name of the component. This will take your component and then add the necessary .tns files. You also do some other tricks, like you copy over the HTML from the web and comment it out. So you have to actually, you'll be able to see in the same file what is it that you're actually migrating that specific component. There's some other flags that you can use in there as well, but this is the most basic scenario. You can also migrate modules. So if you have a lazy loaded module that has like 5 different components inside and then like some other stuff, you could actually call ngg migrate module, provide a name, and then this will go and migrate each individual component, copy over your roots and the common file, but then add your like a .module.ts and .module.tns.ts, where you'll be able to actually add the mobile specific imports and declarations. And that's, I think that's a pretty cool idea. So like, I'm going to give myself a high five and a fist bump. Yes, let's do it. It's basically, I just want to recap of like the approach that we took. And this is production ready, so you should definitely go and check it out. There's some articles as well that I wrote about it. So again, if you call ngArt at NativeScript/schematics on existing project, that's going to migrate your project. And then with ngg migrate component or ngg migrate module, you can go through the migration process of individual components and modules. There's also an alternative solution. So my friend Nathan Walker, he's very much into NX. So I'm pretty sure like a lot of you knows about NX from Narwhal. So Nathan actually went and created an extension to it, which it's called Xplot. So you could go to the nstudio.io/Xplot, and he basically took a different approach to the code sharing. So instead of having everything just in very same project, you actually have things more divided into individual projects. So it's more about like having the right project structure, where you could have one project that is a common between like your web and mobile, and then you have additional projects on top of it that inherit from the bottom one. But also, NX is pretty good where you want to actually have 3 web applications that share some of the items. So that's pretty cool approach. I would say the approach I was talking about at the beginning is good when you just want to have web and mobile. NX is good for more complex situations where you could have multiple web, multiple mobile applications sharing code. That's pretty much in a nutshell. So yeah, if you go to their website, it kind of like they cover different frameworks inside there and everything. So it's definitely worth having a look. So yeah, thanks for listening and thanks for your time.